Good evening, everyone, and welcome once again to the Writer's Room. I'm your co-host, Kat Rocha, the night editor, and with me, as always, is...
Jay Ishirofini, author and alien in a human suit. And if you haven't purchased my books, why haven't you?
And this evening, we have on our panel of writers, we have Raltz Bloodthorn and Fiona Wolf. Hello, guys.
Hello.
Hello. I escaped from the retail mines.
You have.
Yes, that's
now
right.
you're in the word mines instead.
We have the pulp writing Florida woman and the man who channels voices.
Yes.
Yeah.
Who channels some great writer.
And if you're not reading either of these two wonderful people's works, you should be as well.
All right, so before we get started, this topic, we are doing genre fiction, was it ruined by politics? And I'm going to do a little history lesson for you all. In 1928, H.G. Wells published The Open Conspiracy, Blueprints for a World Revolution. Fresh on the heels of World War I, Wells believed he'd found a solution to global war, along with all the other problems that have plagued mankind. Hunger, disease, bigotry, overpopulation. It was patriotism and free enterprise and national borders to blame. You see, in fact, according to Wells, the era of nationhood was obsolete. Extinction was at hand, and the only hope for human survival was to abandon our archaic notions of culture, faith, and national identity. What we needed was a great What we needed is global socialism. Actually, what Wells proposed wasn't all that different from the World Economic Forum's plan today, that being a socialist world state. That isn't coincidental. President Woodrow Wilson, when President Woodrow Wilson formed the League of Nations, Wells was one of the men consulted as to what the League should be. What's more, the League of Nations was eventually the basis for the European Union. Truth is, communist messaging has been worming its way into science fiction for much, much longer than the current day, or even the 60s. As far back as the 1800s, future histories and Marxist utopias were being published as satires, propaganda, and thinly veiled manifestos. As with most novels that favor politics over storytelling, most of these are long forgotten. And I'll leave it from there. But basically, getting back to The Open Conspiracy by Wells, it was a multi-step scheme to thrust humanity forward and control human desires and the destiny of life. This was to be achieved through only the most enlightened and scientifically humane methods possible: mass indoctrination, eugenics, and centralized control of global resources. Indeed, Wells was so confident in his idea that he believed that global governance would supplant all existing faiths and becoming an atheistic world religion. In 1933, Wells gave readers a tour of his utopian novel. I suck at this. In 1933, Wells gave readers a tour of his utopia in his novel, The Shape of Things to Come. Set shortly after World War III, it tells of humanity being lifted from the ashes by a socialist dictatorship ruled by an elite priesthood of scientists and academics. It's a society entirely composed of middle-class intellectuals who while away their time with pleasure and intellectual pursuits. As for who does all the work, it's left to machines and the world's youth, who must undergo 2 years of conscripted labor. Although the book was well received by critics and made into a film, Wells' contemporaries weren't impressed. George Orwell hated it. So did Aldous Huxley. So much so that he wrote Brave New World in response. So there we go. There's a history lesson. We have always been plagued with communist assholes in this genre. And real reader writers have never liked it.
No, that's the reason why those guys pretty much love to shut down the pulps, because they considered the pulps the everyday man's poison, and that wasn't tut good enough for the intellectuals.
Well, call them rags for a reason.
You ever notice the people who tout this stuff, the largest, are the people who, when you get right down to it, don't really do anything substantial to help out their fellow man.
No.
Very true.
Well, no. That's what governments are for. You're supposed to make the government, taxpayers, take care of it.
To quote Ronald Reagan, nothing is more frightening than the phrase, "I'm from the government, I'm here to help."
No, I don't need the government's help. No. No. I will not eat bugs, and I will not live in a pond.
Damn straight.
No, instead we need a raptor. Hello, Buddy Lord.
Mr. Lord?
He's getting there.
muted. Well, he's yawning at the moment.
Okay. So while the raptor yawns, I will continue with the history lesson then, if nobody has anything to add. Now, Aldous Huxley and George Orwell thought the book was shit, and they were very vocal about it. Orwell even savaged Of Things to Come in, I forget the magazine or the newspaper he wrote for, but he used to review books, and he savaged it. But Of Things to Come did have a lasting effect on a young Isaac Asimov, who would go on to present his own vision of a ruling scientific elite in the Foundation trilogy. And this is no coincidence. And just as Wells had been a member of the Fabian Society, who used social influence to promote global socialism, Asimov started his own private club of communist reactionaries. They were known as the Futurians, and their membership included some of the biggest names in pulp sci-fi, such as Damon Knight, Cyril Kornbluth, and Frederick Pohl. Rallying under the banner of communism, the Futurians' stated goal was to use science fiction to actively work for the realization of a world state. Among their many achievements, the Futurians were the first to distribute political pamphlets at a sci-fi convention. They also hold the honor of pioneering the trend of hijacking panel discussions to spew radical agitprop. And guess what they hated the most? They got mad and were yelling at fans for wanting escapist fiction and idealism. That it was time to rise up and overthrow the system and write about politics in our sci-fi. These fuckers have always sucked.
What were you just saying, Rolf, earlier about people commenting about your own works?
I have received people saying that it's gratifying to read science fiction that doesn't beat everybody over the head with modern day politics and modern day social issues, because, I said it 8,000 years after Earth was glassed. So, there's no current politics. And people like it because of that.
There's also roving AIs out there that legitimately want to help, but they're also under probation.
Yes.
So, Buddy, can you talk now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, cool.
Yay.
Welcome to the club.
Hello, everybody. Oh, I'm everybody. I'm the only buddy. But, hello.
Yes. And thank
Dynamite.
goodness all the indies have stopped assaulting my wallet.
Oh, goodness. I was talking to Xevious. He wanted me to say hello to you, Ishi.
Oh.
Talk to you in a while. So he says, hey, say hi for me. So, hi.
Well, getting back to the topic, so apparently we've always been plagued with communists trying to drag their crap into fandom and generally making everything miserable. It's my contention that where Marxism goes, division follows, and it just sucks the joy out of everything. And that this has been going on since the beginning, and it's done nothing good for us. And in fact, most of the fiction it's produced has been long forgotten because it wasn't very good.
I have a unique view on communism, probably out of everybody here.
All right.
Because I was a REMF, I worked logistics, and at one point I helped haul food into Eastern Germany after the wall fell down. So I saw what 50 years of communism did. There were factories from World War II that were still bombed out that hadn't been repaired.
Oof. Well, my dad did tell me a few stories because he was stationed in near the wall, and they had to prep all the food and everything as all the refugees were starting to cross over. Yep.
And I have a rather unique view of it because I talk to people who lived underneath the system their whole lives, and so it's really undergone in the past few years this rebranding and this massive PR campaign. And it kind of startles me.
Yeah. Well, the thing that gets me also that when I was researching the communism problem and the fact that these assholes keep sticking their nose into sci-fi and shitting it up, for lack of a better term, is that it seems to really attract specifically New Yorkers for some reason. No, seriously, it is amazing how many of them were all based out of New York. I don't know what it is about New York.
It's Greenwich Village.
Yeah,
I mean, don't you have to be kind of a bougie piece of crap to really like communism in the first place? I mean, it's written by a guy that basically just sat in the basement of somebody richer than him and wrote about how everybody didn't give him enough money.
it was
I'm
worse
gonna
than that. He was a spoiled rich kid.
I'm gonna
I
mention,
mean-
like I put in the chat earlier, is JD Cohen is covering a whole lot of this, especially from the pulp angle to the crazy, commies that infiltrated fandom. And he did this whole subsection on fandom and illustrated history, and there was a book back from like the 60s or late 70s that they were already making their tut commentary well before then. So I can relink it again.
It's
Actually,
kind of. It's
yeah.
Oh, I was just gonna say it's kind of weird. It's a strange evolution if you think about it, because I mean, like you study like one of the first written languages ever, first written anything ever, the Vedas, right? The Hindu script and Sanskrit, and it talks about the spirit and the matter and connecting them, and you take that further and you go into like Zarathustra, right, and Nietzsche, and he talks about how the materialism and the rejection of the materialism is like saying the kind of same thing is that like I have a body, but I am not of the body. And if you do body things, if you are materialistic, then you're not moving forward with the spirit. And I think communism, everybody wants to say it is for the spirit, but it's purely for the material. It's purely for the body.
Well, and a lot of people don't understand, they just got a basic reading of it, and they always skip over one particular sentence, which is each according to his ability, each according to his need. If you're just sitting around jerking off and never contributing anything, you get to starve. They gloss over that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they've all got this weird idea of I can't believe this is a thing. They call it space luxury communism, where it's essentially Wall-E.
Luxury gay space communism.
And it's not a joke. I thought this was something edgelords said to rip on idiots.
No.
But they really believe this.
No.
We don't have the Star Trek tech to give them everything we want, where they could just sit there and do wax poetic all day.
They wouldn't achieve anything.
Well, they believe it. It's funny when you talk to some people. Who's that idiot movie Bob?
They all thought that we'd have Star Trek by now.
Have flying cars by now. Dude, a flying car couldn't hold your ass anyway. So what are you talking about?
He's famous for his tweet of "I deserve a flying car and a robot body in a spaceship."
Yeah, right. He deserves a good kick in the ass, is what he deserves. But yeah, the other thing that I've noticed is that it seems to draw spoiled rich kids from New York, especially, but spoiled rich kids who show up into something they didn't build, essentially the sci-fi community, the pulp community. These people didn't build it. They show up and then say, you know what, you're doing it all wrong. You need to write stuff that I want, politics, because I've got a great idea and you're just missing out. You know, these people never build anything of their own. Ever.
Nope, it's like a plague of locusts. They go from one thing to another, skin it, go to another thing, then skin it, go, repeat.
And what's amazing is that after the pulp era, which really raised sci-fi to being profitable, I mean, there were how many magazines being published in the 50s alone?
Tons.
Yeah, numerous. It's like, and you could find any kind of comic book on a spinner rack everywhere.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
See, it surprises me that Asimov was a communist, considering if when you get right down to it, the robots taking over humanity and coddling them and stunting them so badly is a critique of communism.
It isn't.
And that wasn't how he intended it.
Everybody took it as that. And just like everyone thought Robots of Dawn and Caves of Steel was a dystopia? No, he was writing what he thought was a great idea.
Because I remember where it was discovered that the robots were going out with these huge ships and terraforming planets, whether they're whether there are sentient beings on it or not, just using energy weapons from space and just obliterating them. And any species were immediately targeted by these robot ships, and they committed xenocide across the galaxy. They literally were the berserkers from
That sounds like
Saberhagen.
Ender's Game. You know?
Well, wait, which novel was this? 'Cause
There
this-
is only enough for one.
Yeah, it's I can't remember which one. It's one of the later books.
okay.
It's one of the later books, and he's talking about, you know, the dirt theory, that there's some magical field of dirt that goes through space and channels. And it's eventually revealed that no, it's robot spaceships that were launched early in the days of humanity, and by the robots when the robots ruled Earth, in order to just commit xenocide out there.
Well,
No,
But of course, that was his later stuff.
I just
He
know
got
that
real
in, if you read Caves of Steel, the first of the Elijah Bailey series, he has to brainwash his own main character in the first act in order to open up his mind to the possibilities of communism.
and he thinks this is a good idea. That was the
Jeez.
thing, is Isaac Asimov was not a big fan of everyone having free will. That really shocked me.
I've never understood that. I mean, some of these sci-fi writers are right. They don't think people should have free will, and they don't get it that the reason why they're able to write this stuff and they're allowed to critique the government they live under is because of free will.
Another one that was kind of interesting was that they all love Asimov, right? He's regarded as, you know, but they're trying to destroy Heinlein. Just a little story about the two authors. Asimov was such a pervert ass grabber at conventions that you could hear him coming and going by the squealing of women. And it got to the point where Heinlein would directly stand behind Ursula K. Le Guin whenever Asimov was around, so he couldn't grab her ass. Yeah, what a guy.
Yeah, JD's stuff goes into some of that too.
He had
Like,
an ass fetish.
oof.
He did. He definitely did.
He had a what was it, an enema fetish?
That too, yes.
Oh my goodness! I did not need to know.
Yeah.
He had a collection of
It was very
artwork.
specific.
And I
Yes.
would say,
Depicting-
hey, Owen Lister, I see that you said hello to me. Hello back to you. I didn't miss it. I didn't want to interrupt everybody.
So going on, the pulp writers really established the foundation for 20th century science fiction. And I would say the one that really doesn't get the credit is Heinlein was the first to make the jump from the pulps to the mainstream. It was quite an accomplishment when he was being published in the Saturday Evening Post with science fiction. That was a big moment. We don't talk about that anymore.
Well, that, and a lot of people don't realize like what influenced a lot of those bigger hits of like the Star Trek, Star Wars, and all that. Edgar Rice Burroughs, John Carter of Mars was a instrumental point for a lot of those creatives up and coming.
Oh,
Yeah.
greatly instrumental.
Yeah, John Carter of Mars was a massive influence on Star Wars. So was the writing of Leigh Brackett, apparently.
Mhm.
Those were
Of course-
amazing books.
Of course, Brackett also wrote The Empire Strikes Back. So I mean,
And
But-
even stuff like Lensman, like
oh
those
yeah,
were
definitely
things
Lensman.
all those people grew up on. It's like-
You know, they don't grow up on this stuff anymore. I mean, most of these people have never read fiction published after about mid 1990s.
Yeah, I
I
would
don't
say
think
that-
they read anything that isn't approved by like a 40
Oh, yeah,
person
but that's
committee
why
that
the
has
Hugo
a
people wanted to
diversity
become,
and inclusion manager within it.
yeah, that's why the Hugo people wanted to basically choke out the pulps and everything else to become the tastemakers.
Well,
You know who else?
I look at the Hugo Awards as I would not respect an award that nominated me.
You know who else wanted to choke out the pulps? Asimov and Clark.
Clark, really?
Yeah, because they
Yeah.
felt that was lowbrow entertainment. It was dirtying
Mhm.
up the intelligent science fiction.
The
No,
more
Clark was a
hard
far-
science fiction.
Clark was a farm boy who turned engineer, who turned science fiction writer. I have a lot of respect for his work.
I mean,
Like-
it's unfortunately pretty human for people to fall into the zero sum fallacy. You know, that
Yeah.
like if you're making it, I'm not, or somebody else isn't that I think is more worthy than you or whatever.
And-
Sour grapes, blah, 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 blah.
I don't get it. I mean, I'd be happy for you guys if you guys, made $1 million a month. I'd be happy for you guys. because
If I had that money, I'd be bankrolling so much pulp rev.
I
I
mean,
think
well,
it's literally because people are stupid. I mean, it's honestly, I mean, it's a logical fallacy because
Well-
everything, especially in entertainment, you got 7 billion people. You have what should be called, or what should be stated as a blue ocean market, which means that it's not like a limited area where sharks are feasting on the same fish over and over and over and over, right? Unless you just stay in the same damn sea. Move.
Small-minded people think that the success of others will hurt them.
Well,
Yeah.
you have to remember they did an experiment where they said, here's your choice. You can have $100,000 and this guy gets nothing. Or you can take $200,000, but this guy gets $1 million. The majority of people choose the 100,000, so the other guy gets nothing.
That's retarded.
No, I'd be like, in any event, no, I would have picked, like, I don't mind a 200K. I could do a lot with that.
I mean, I'm sure I've been down so far that $20 would have made a difference. $20 meant I didn't have to walk to work.
And who knows, maybe the person that gets that $1 million will end up,
maybe they're worse off than me.
Yeah, either that or they would end up, funding other projects you wouldn't think would be possible. You just never can tell.
Well, it's infected everything, and I blame the 60s. I really do. I blame the 60s.
Oh, I'm glad you're getting to that because I got some stuff for you.
Everybody wanted to include social commentary. I mean, the zombie movies are social commentary. No, because if his later work is anything to go by, he was making a zombie movie, not social commentary. I mean, I don't know if you watched his later works after Day of the Dead, but they are the worst zombie movies out. Well, Land of the Dead is okay until the very stupid end.
Oh no, it's about the illegal aliens.
No, it's not.
I mean, I think you could take a well-written construct of any kind that is supposed to be for entertainment, and you can make it about a lot of things because it is well-written. It's got all the bits and pieces to a lot of different things, and that's one of the things that makes it great, that makes something timeless, right? But it's sort of like, as Paul Rand, the designer, he basically said that perfection just kind of happens every once in a while when you do good every time.
Yeah. I mean,
okay, yeah.
The other problem is people include politics because they've got nothing else. They've got nothing else in their gun
can't think beyond that.
I don't even. Yeah, I mean, I was going to say that, like, God, I hate it. It's people have a cracked concept of postmodernism. They think postmodernism. Okay, go ahead, Fiona.
No, I'm just saying it's because it's so much nihilism. They can only see what's in front of their nose.
I don't even think it's that. I just think that literally it's like what they have is they don't really want to be negative, or that's not what they're thinking of. But we've taught, especially in schools for the past 20 years, this kind of form of postmodernism, which is that it's like, oh, well, the upper crust and the lower crust, and we've got that 1 versus 99%, and it's just like preached to you every day in like 9,000 different formats, and everybody sees it. And they don't really all postmodernism is you can be more than you were born to be. That's all it meant. And it's been turned into this whole like stupid bourgeoisie versus the world kind of thing. And it was never meant to be that. And there's room for everything.
It's sad sack mentality. It's like, we suck, everything sucks, everything's gonna die. It's like, man, get away from me with that kind of energy. Oh,
well, the problem is that like people have talked about like comic books, right? And they say the comic books don't have heroes anymore, and the new they did this study recently where they had the top 750 graphic novels, right? The 20 years that they've done this previously, Marvel and DC have always been in the top 20. The last 3 years they haven't had a single book in the top. Like,
have you read modern comics?
Yeah,
they're terrible.
And it's ruled by manga and like dog bone or whatever that is.
Dog bone?
And it's like scholastic, graphic novels and these kind of things
the dog
are destroying. And everybody's like, oh, who cares? Those aren't comics. It's because that is the pontiff. That's the bridge to children. And you don't have it anymore because you went all in for speculators and whatever you did in the 90s. And now that line is broken. And it's the same thing with a lot of other things. That line is broken.
Well, we were mentioning the 60s, and the thing is, let's talk about the 60s a little bit. Yeah, I know. After the pulps had really come into fruition during the 50s, the 60s, the love generation, the rebels, all that crap, had their own version of the 60s counterculture in writing, which was called the New Wave. And the New Wave showed up. They were all communists for the most part. There were a few exceptions, like Philip K. Dick wasn't, Harlan Ellison wasn't, but most of them were commies and radical feminists and all the other. And the first thing they did was set about trying to destroy what came before them. They actively were trying to destroy the pulps, and they especially hated Heinlein because he was everything they despised.
No, I didn't like some of Heinlein's books, and I thought they were weird, but that was just my taste. I'm not going to destroy them because other people like them.
When you're writing that long and you turn into a dirty old man, you're going to have some weird books.
Oh yeah, I totally get it. I mean, some of the books were the writer's barely disguised fetish. I mean,
yeah.
Oh.
Which is why I don't include midgets in my work.
But oh well, you should. You really should. But anyway, just talking about Heinlein and the pulps in general, ever since the 1960s, the left has gone to great lengths to destroy the pulps and specifically Heinlein's work. Or as John Scalzi put it, Heinlein was a fascist, sexist relic of a primitive age. It's a lie that's been repeated so much, people believe it, even though it isn't true. Meanwhile, all this crap that they're saying about, racist, sexist, no. What it is the bait and switch.
Here's the thing about Scalzi.
What?
He pretty much ripped off Heinlein for his first book, and his second and third books are okay, I hate to talk bad about a fellow writer because I don't like him.
He's a shitbag.
But I've interacted with him personally, and I dislike him.
He really is the king of shitbags.
I really don't like him personally. I read his second and third book and asked for a refund. They were that bad.
Wow.
And for one thing, somebody who hates the military and doesn't even bother to do research on the military should not write about the military.
Didn't you write The Old Man's War or something?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And it was wholesale lifted from quite a few things. I mean, sure, you don't have to be original, but
isn't it basically like Red Shirt Star Trek? What if Red Shirt Star Trek was a soldier? I don't know.
As Heinlein, as a Heinlein ripoff, it's not a surprise. Scalzi told me personally, I don't come up with new ideas. I just take a few things that are really popular and make it seem like something new. He said it himself.
So he's a meme generator.
Yeah. And I've met him. I talked to him. There are a few people on Earth that I would say, it'd be wonderful if that person got hit by a truck and then the truck backed over them. And then the person wasn't dead. So the truck backed over them again and again, like 4 or 5 times. And then dogs came to the dying body and started nipping at it.
Only way to be sure.
And then shit on the corpse.
I only interacted with him online, so I don't know.
I mean, this sounds like the generation of the world in Norwegian philosophy,
I mean, body language means a lot, but it's just it's just when I interacted with him online, he really left a bad taste in my mouth.
He damns people with faint praise, like when Brandon Sanderson started sharing all his wealth from his Kickstarter to help fund other people. Oh, he's on the lowest difficulty setting because he's a white man. It's like, Scalzi, you fucking.
I remember that, and I know what
isn't he a white man?
The day he posted that, you're gonna love this. There's a little story. The day he posted that, I was on Twitter and I saw that. Right. I'm sitting in with the recovery from surgery, and they've told me that, I'm badly damaged, but I'm going to keep my arm. And I get home and I've got a disconnect notice from my electricity. So I had to sell something that was very near and dear to me in order to pay the electric bill. And, here I am, white, operating on the lowest difficulty setting, physically crippled, 2 TBIs, high school dropout. Yeah, I'm totally on the lowest difficulty setting here. And it was offensive. It was offensive to have some rich upper middle class twat told me I'm operating on the lowest difficulty setting because of my sex and my skin color.
Yep.
Well, let me tell you my Scalzi story.
Oh,
Because I've met Scalzi. I met him when he was the president of SIFWA, the Science Fiction Authors Writers of America.
Yep.
And that's supposed to be a union for all the sci-fi writers. Now, we won't even get into what he did, how he basically he kicked all the Christians out, all the Mormons, all the conservatives and libertarians, all of them got kicked out. He's been trying to decanonize books. The guy's a shitbag. We won't get into that. We'll get into my personal experience. I knew nothing about him. I just knew he was the president of SIFWA. And I was at a convention, and it had just opened, and I left my booth and wandered down, and I saw he was there, and no one was talking to him. So I said, "Hey, do you mind if I ask you a question?" He said, "Oh, sure, come on over." And him and his friend greet me over, very friendly. "Oh, what do you want to know?" And I have our books with us, and I just said, "Yeah, okay." There are a lot of comics fans that are potential sci-fi readers and vice versa. What do you think would be the best way to bridge the gap between the two communities? He then proceeds to tear into me that I'm a moron and a loser and a hack and I don't know anything I'm talking about. And the reason no one's ever heard of me is because my books are shit. And until I actually achieve something, I should shut my mouth. And that, he's smart and he knows what sells. And he knows that people are generally dumb and that he writes for an audience that is usually as dumb as his mommy told me. And that, in fact, people don't like original or new stuff. What they like is what they like. And so what you've got to do is steal other work that is already popular and trick people into thinking it's new.
I mean, I don't even think people think that what he does is new. Eventually he got into that crowd, and he more uses that than anything else.
He was always like that, though.
I mean, he's like
always like that. He was always a con artist.
Yeah, okay. Well, then, I mean, like you said, he's just a piece of shit then. I mean, I remember when he wrote this, like, big article, and it was so, oh, God, it was so scummy, where he's like, look at the people I hang out with. I know more about nerddom than you do.
Oh,
and
Lord.
if you call these cosplay girls, like, that they're not true nerds, then let me tell you something. I know more. Look at my entourage. And he showed a picture of like Will Wheaton and I don't know, like some other people.
Soy jacks. So many soy jacks.
And he's just like, look at who I hang out with. And I'm like, dude, shut up. I mean, good God. If you've got to point to your friends to tell us you can write, you can't write.
A lot of trad pub is also stuck in the am writing mode on Twitter. It's like, don't listen. Everybody who out there who wants to write, don't listen to am writing. Don't listen to writing community.
I don't even know who these people are.
Most of the air quote writers on Twitter, they sit there and wax poetic all day, but they don't actually do what they say they're going to do is write.
Hell, my wife has a problem pulling me away from the keyboard.
Oh yeah, because once it becomes a habit, you can't stop.
Yeah. I mean, I fugue stated for like an hour and a half and wrote over 3,000 words today.
Yes.
Okay, well, I can't seem to find it right now, but if anyone can find the clip of Scalzi before he was a famous sci-fi writer, and he went on to Oprah to talk about male feminism.
Talk about what? Talk about what?
Male feminism. Please share the link because I can't find it right now.
Basically the entry to being a sexual predator, more like.
Yeah. I wouldn't. If it turns out that
if you knew half of what was under the SIFWA banner nowadays. Oh.
Really?
I avoid all that stuff. I mean, I really do. I'm a hermit.
I don't even know what that is, and I don't care.
I got older and, was just disconnected from everything because I don't care.
It'll drive you up the wall, especially when Conservative Incorporated, that wants to grift its own victimhood, says, where's all the writers for us? And then next year, where's all the writers for us? And then the next year.
buy some of our books,
Yeah, we're all out there. Really.
Well,
you just got to platform us. Oh, you don't want to because you want to grift saying that there's not enough writers for you? Huh.
I went to a few writers conventions, small ones on the West Coast.
Yeah.
And holy fucking shit. I mean, I've been around some debauched motherfuckers before. Hell, I've been debauched before. Come back, do a 6-month deployment, and come back, and you got all that money. Caligula would be right there with me. But holy shit! I mean, these writers can. No thanks, man. I'm not interested in that. And some of them get aggressive. I was like, nah, I don't swing that way. Thanks anyway, man. Were you sure? Have you ever tried it? I'm like, I went to college.
no.
I was like, I went to college. He's like, oh, so you tried it? I'm like, I didn't say that. And he just kept, finally, I just was like, look, you're about to get fucking put in a dumpster.
Trash
And
fire, 12
for
o'clock.
like 2 days, he was, after the convention, I'd be sitting there drinking, and as soon as my wife would go to the bathroom, he'd just like swish over. And apparently he was like some big writer. He had like 8 or 9 books. And he's like, come on, hook up with me, and I'll hook you up with, I can make sure that, that your books get out there. And I'm thinking, I'm not selling my books with my dick, man. And I quit going to those things because, I mean, fuck. I mean, I'm not going to throw rocks. I've done some pretty horrific shit. I mean, I used to smuggle prostitutes, but I mean, come on, man.
So, I think really back in the 1930s when Asimov and his buddies, the Futurians, tried to invade sci-fi. Now, let's just say the greatest generation was much greater than we. They knew how to handle that shit. They banned him. Yeah. And they told him basically, you and your club, if you ever try and distribute your commie pamphlets and pull this shit ever again, you're out. And there was an exclusion exit. We won't even consider books that push this shit because the fans hated what you did so much. Don't come back. Well, we need to do that again.
You have to remember, it was so bad that they split sci-fi. They literally did in the 1980s or maybe even the 1970s, but I noticed it in the 80s. They split sci-fi.
Yeah.
There's 2 sci-fis out there. There's your mainstream sci-fi, which everybody knows. Your Anne McCaffrey, your John Scalzi, your what's his name, Chuck Windbag, something like that.
That wasn't the 80s. We had better writers.
No. I'm talking about now. I'm just saying. But you have what's called men's adventure.
Yeah.
And there is where you find like Deathlands and Outbound and the Survivalist. And anybody who tells me the Survivalist is not science fiction has never read beyond the first couple books, because that gets into cryopods and energy weapons and
even
cloning.
Doc Savage. That was
Doc Savage. Doc Savage was an amazing parody. It was great satire. Sorry, but they split it. They had to split it because these authors like Axler and other guys literally couldn't publish in sci-fi because they get shut out.
I mean, specifically, again, I'll go back. The guilty parties were Asimov, Clarke, and their buddies.
Well, the feminist writers of the 60s and 70s who started muscling everybody out really didn't help.
Well, it was more than just the feminist writers. It was the new wave in general, with only a few exceptions. Let me pull the list up, and I can actually list who's responsible for starting the real hate campaign. Because, again, Clarke and Asimov and their bunch never had enough pull to like ban people in the 50s. There were too many different opinions. Too many publishers were not lefties, like John Campbell. Or was it? Yeah, John Campbell, I think.
If you really want something,
they were waiting for a couple of the speed bumps to retire or pass away before.
And once they had their little hippie stormtroopers is when it really started to take hold. And I'll pull the list. So basically, Thomas Desch, Samuel Delaney, Judith Merrill, Joanna Russ, Frederick Pohl, Michael Moorcock, Brian Aldiss, and by the way, Moorcock repented and became an anarchist. But Donald A. Wollheim, James Blish, Alexei Pashnin, and H. Bruce Franklin, who was like the big sci-fi reviewer for the New York Times.
Oh, he worked for the New York Times, opinion discarded.
Yeah, they were essentially sci-fi's red faction and were the ones that primarily were responsible for enforcing that split that you're talking about, right? And they were all hardcore commies. Bruce Franklin of the New York Times, by the way, was a founding member of the Revolutionary Communist Party in the United States, which does and still advocates for the overthrow of the United States through violence, and is now basically supporting Antifa and producing Antifas. Joanna Russ, insane crazed feminist. But yeah, all of them. And then if Philip K. Dick is to be believed, Thomas Diesch and Stanislav Lem were both payroll on the KGB payroll. So
Does anybody remember when after the wall went down and a bunch of KGB files got released and it came out that the New York Times and the Washington Post were massively funded by the KGB?
I didn't remember that part, but that doesn't shock me in the least.
It was a huge, like, 3-page article in the fucking Army Times. I remember that.
Oof.
Wow.
Yeah, just like it turned out that
they have any of those, because they did save some stuff from way back when.
And, it's also like they found out that when the wall came down and then the Soviet Union fell, all the files revealed that McCarthy was right.
Yes.
Joe McCarthy was right. All the people he'd been accusing really were. There were a few that he was wrong about, but most really were.
His mistake was going after military officers who wouldn't toe his line.
Yeah, that was stupid, especially Marshall.
Yeah.
That's actually why Ike beat him up. No, seriously, Ike punched him.
Yeah.
For going after Marshall.
Yep, in the middle of a war, he wanted to go after one of the commanding generals who was winning.
Okay, so...
Dominic, classic science fiction and fantasies are timeless in addition to having more memorability than what we're getting at the moment. As for the authors you are mentioning, I didn't know about all this.
Yeah, well, that's one of the reasons I'm putting it in my book.
And again, Draco, Moorcock repented and became an anarchist.
Yeah.
So he didn't stay a commie.
He's still a cantankerous, contrarian asshole, but that's okay.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm right there with him.
Another genre wheelhouse that got splatted was sword and sorcery too.
Oh God!
Yeah.
Targeted towards the male psyche.
Oh man, what got me is, I was sitting there and I one of these writers' workshops I attended, they had some authors up there, and it was all of them were female who were talking, and they were talking about getting rid of toxic masculinity in books and everything, and how they should be careful not to show male aggression in a positive way. And I was kind of stupid because it was the first one I'd ever been to, and I raised my hand. I went there as part of a college assignment, and I said, well, if you're gonna, do you have do you have medieval combat in your books? She's like, well, yes. And the way she said it, I mean, and I was like, well, then who does the fighting? And she goes, well, women, because women can do just as good as anything as a male. And I was like, oh, okay. And she goes, oh, you have a different opinion? I was like, just my wife elbowed me and I went, no. Because, I mean, and it just startled me. She was like, oh, you can't have toxic masculinity in there. You should get rid of masculinity. You should never show, you should never showcase masculinity as a good thing. And it's like, then who does the fighting in your books? Because, I've been to SCA events and the guys wearing all the plate mail and fighting for longer than 10 minutes are guys.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Unless you have a setting where you can make sure that the women can have the same physical advantage as the guys, well,
yeah, throw in some genetic engineering or magic. I mean, genetic engineering is great for sci-fi. After, a couple hundred years of genetic engineering and tweaking, physically, there's not really that much difference between men and women except for the endocrine system and the reproductive systems. Musculature, you could tweak it and you can get away with it, but nobody ever does. Nobody ever does this. Nope. Everybody is still stuck on 1960s sci-fi. They never get past it, Gay luxury space communism. Well, what other kind of governments would you have out there? Oh, well, there's a monarchy. Okay, what else?
Expanded space monarchy like in Dune?
Yeah. And it's like, give me something new. I would love to read a book with something new. Well, there's nothing new out there. I don't know. Cyberpunk was pretty fucking new. Sorry. I'll stop before I start ranting and raving like a lunatic.
No, it's all good.
Ralt, we
I mean-
bring you on because you do rant and because you've got great stories.
Well, even when you look at the weapons, look at the sci-fi weapons. I mean, for God's sake, anybody who touts lasers is a mouth-breathing moron. You want to know how the military would actually get rid of lasers? It's called microprism. It's called fluid suspended microprisms. It's in an aerosol grenade. You throw it out there, the liquid goes out there, and inside the cloud are millions of tiny microprisms. The laser hits it, and it just turns to rainbows. Nice job. Now we're at a rave. Okay. Oh, a particle projection cannon. Okay. Well, yeah, it still has atmospheric attenuation. Give me a rail gun, and I'll knock you on your ass from 8 miles out. An M1 Abrams tanks were getting mission kills at 2 miles. Your laser can get that far? No.
Yeah, but that's not why people use them. I mean, if you use all that, you're just going to lose the reader. The reason why they use lasers and all that kind of stuff is because it's common, because it's easy to think about. When you're creating something, especially that's imaginative, the first thing that comics will teach you this. Like, the first thing you have to do is like, you have to write to be visual, because even if people are reading it, they're imagining it.
Well, I actually addressed it, in my books that there's a reason why the Terrans use kinetic weapons. Number one, it's a throwback to when we picked up Iraq and said, "Fuck your revolutionary arms race. This is my planet now." And the other reason is they've got creation engines. They don't suffer ammunition shortages. So all the kinetic DACA you want, because laser weapons are all well and good, but atmosphere matters.
Yes.
Atmosphere.
But this is why I also write space fantasy instead of like doing more harder sci-fi components.
You're not using lasers, using blasters, the magical weapon that just shoots things.
Yeah.
Although I do mention I have like anti-grav stuff. It's like wee, but I also have superheroes, so it's like wee.
Well, I disagree with the reader. With the reader can't comprehend it. I fully believe.
I didn't say they couldn't comprehend it. I said they don't want to.
Sorry. Okay, you're right. I misunderstood you. I misheard you. My apologies. I don't want to put
lazy
words in your
readers
mouth.
wouldn't want to.
I mean, I didn't run into that problem. People wanted to know more. People wanted me to go more in depth. And I think that nowadays that's part of the problem, is too many people assume that the reader doesn't want more. And so they give you this thin veneer of science fiction over nothing. And I mean, look at the recent Star Trek movies. I mean, can you honestly imagine the bridge of a warship having a fist fight between the XO and the CO? Can you imagine that?
Only if it was like more of a soap opera kind of setting, and not more of a serious, maybe space opera
comedy.
Yeah, because really, most of the time, your commanding officer and the XO will have their disagreements behind closed doors.
I
read something recently where they talked about, it was a particle physics PhD from frick. I'd have to go pick up the book again, but they were talking about particle physics, and she was talking about the different kind of physics that relate to how we view star maps and where something actually is. And they were talking about how they actually used it correctly in, I don't know, STD, the newest or the second newest Star Trek or something.
A very apt title for it.
Yes.
And I was like, so they got one thing right? Well, that's good,
Star Trek STD, the only show that'll actually give you AIDS.
See, I never watched it. I quit watching it Voyager. I quit watching with Voyager when they expected me to believe that this immature, vain, belligerent, egotistical, and temperamental woman is a starship captain these people can trust their lives with. I couldn't watch it. Of course, it didn't help that I just come out of the military, and it was like, this person, all of these people on this bridge crew are the most incompetent officers I've seen in my life.
Voyager was awful.
Mm-hmm.
I'll agree. I did not like Voyager. And
of course,
I've actually never watched a full episode of STD. I've watched other people review it.
I haven't watched anything past The Next Generation.
I
didn't watch all of that.
I saw one episode of STD on my cousin's super special Amazon Fire Stick that could pick up super special things without them having to worry about bills.
I saw the 10-minute preview or whatever, because X1 was thinking about like doing like a YouTube thing on it. And so he's like, yeah, dude, here, watch this. And I was like, I watched that 10-minute preview where like the chubby redheaded girl is locked in the commissary or something. with an invisible princess. And then they're both the bestest ever at everything, and so they
What?
become friends.
Well, look, you got to give them points for at least making a special needs person an officer.
Yeah.
I mean, that chick's pretty slow.
I've never watched it. I quit watching Star Trek when I realized that they're blandly going where nobody cared to go before.
Well, I mean, it's just like anything else. I mean, they just sort of took it and they said, okay, this is what people like. It's like Star Wars, like those guys, what is it, Half in the Bag?
Yeah.
You know, where
Yeah.
they've got that whole thing where they're like,
Shatner
80,
doesn't like them.
80, you know, Jedi.
Okay.
Poor Shatner doesn't like them much. But I don't really know the origin of that particular rivalry.
I don't really watch. I mean,
Let
I watched
me,
this one and a couple others.
I've got a Star Trek story I've got to share. Okay, this is
Oh,
from my
boy.
past personal experience. Just a moment to make everyone a bit sad. Star Trek Enterprise. Nobody liked it. It flopped pretty bad. And then the third season, they changed everything up. They got a new showrunner, new writers, and they were really trying to kind of go back to the nostalgia of the original series. And it almost could have been a good show. And it was one of my few brushes with Hollywood. My second one, actually. It was actually the thing that really convinced me, look, none of my dealings with Hollywood have been good. Why bother? And that was, I was contracted with Jimmy
Diggs.
Jimmy Diggs. God, it's been so long. Jimmy Diggs was mentoring me as a writer, and I learned quite a bit from him. He was a script writer. He'd done episodes of Deep Space Nine and Voyager, and the plans that they had for the fourth season would have been awesome. Now, at the time, I had just graduated for doing 3D art and animation, and he'd had me model a starship to help sell his pitch for the Kazinti, for those who are familiar with
I know who that is. That's Niven.
Yep. And the plan they had was awesome. And I got to go in and tour the studio and walk on the bridge and talk to everyone. And it was really depressing because we did everything. And then a producer walked out and said, nope, we just got the call. This is all getting torn down next week. Show's canceled.
Huh.
So I stole some stuff off the Enterprise. But anyway.
Oh man, but no, I can see where they were trying because I did watch part of Enterprise. Yeah,
The Mirror episodes were kind of where they were heading.
I quit watching TV in the 90s.
Good for you.
Yeah, that's a good idea because there isn't much worthwhile after the year 2000. Nope.
We quit in
My wife's-
2008.
Yep.
My wife started getting really angry. We would watch TV, and they would always show these retarded men and these hyper competent women in marriages. And my wife would get pissed off. She's like, "Why is she even married to this retard? Either he's got a dong the size of a horse, or she's a masochist." And I just quit watching it because I hate smarmy children. Because don't make me backhand you. And the women were always so abusive toward these men, and these men were functionally retarded. They worked their asses to the bone. And, Married with Children was supposed to be satire, not something that people actually did. And I just turned off the TV one day and said, I'm going to cancel the cable. And my wife went, okay.
Yeah, I like
Great feeling, huh?
older shows because they made men and women more like teammates rather than adversaries.
Yeah.
Fighting for clout.
Me and my wife, we were always a team. I mean, you always backed each other up. And watching these shows, I just couldn't take it. That's also when I quit reading a lot of mainstream fiction because it got really mean-spirited.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I mean, it got to where feminists didn't want equality. They wanted revenge.
Well, I read this story where Hillary Clinton gets in a train wreck and goes to Valhalla and chews out Odin and the other gods and then is sent back to Earth as a Valkyrie.
You sure this isn't a parody?
No, I shit you not. It was an award-winning story. And I read this. And this was during Bill Clinton's first term.
Oh
This
my
is how
god!
I read this, and I was like, okay, all I know about the Clintons is he sent me to Bosnia. What the fuck is this?
Oh, I'll have to link Spy times Family because that is
it's
wholesome.
it's in there. It's out there somewhere because it was like an award winner, and I was like, what the fuck? Odin would hit her with lightning. What's going on? And oh, it's an award winner. I was like, what the shit?
Well, it's the diminishment of heroes. I mean,
You know that Valkyries have to be subservient to Odin.
Yeah, they glossed over that.
Yeah.
No. Not if you are the bestest ever.
And the worst part of it was I was in it was his second term. That's right. It was second term, but it was written during his first term. I was assigned to read this in a college class. She handed out this book of best-selling science fiction of, I think, 1993.
I had a psych class wanted me to read, and I wanted me to read Atlas Shrugged, and I didn't like the first 10 pages, so I left.
Well, I had to take this course, even though it was supposed to be a technical writing course, and instead we read feminist fiction, even though I was supposed to be an engineer.
Oh God,
it's one of those classes.
I got a tech writing degree in college. At least the main courses I took there did tell you how to write tech manuals and do that sort of stuff and pamphlets and oh man. Funny how I'm using my degree for my hobby instead of actually using it for other jobs, but hey, it got me to E3 status right from the get-go.
I was doing electronic engineering, and I was hired out of school before I graduated with a nice big paycheck and a big sign-on bonus. And 3 days after I showed up for work, NAFTA was signed, and they moved the plant to Mexico.
Oh.
And they asked if I wanted to go. I was like, no, I think I'm going to stay here.
When I went to college in Louisville, I originally signed on for a program that was being sponsored by UPS, because UPS and University of Louisville are tight, and it was a robotics program. We were supposed to study robotic engineering, which was basically what they comprised of 3 different types of engineering: mechanical, electronic, and I think it was aeronautic. Yeah, because they wanted you to work on the planes, and then also psychology, not psychiatry, but psychology. And it was like, okay, so half the people started on psychology, half the people started engineering because they didn't have the faculty to do both at the same time. 2 years into the program, UPS said, we hired somebody from China to do it. Goodbye. And just canceled everybody's scholarships.
Yeah. I mean,
okay,
anyway,
well,
science fiction in the 60s, though, really damaged everything. Sorry, go ahead.
Before we call it a night, I want to do 2 things. We'll each promote our own work. But before we do that, since we've been talking about so much bad fiction, why don't we promote stuff that's currently being written by modern authors that is good that we can recommend? I'm sure Fiana's got a ton of them.
I've been linking them in the chat.
Well, name one, and we'll bring it up.
Okay, so I linked the Biz Archives earlier. These guys are trying to get back into the mode of the classic pulps and really get into the sword and sorcery vein. I know DMR Books has a little bit more presence right now, but these guys are getting pretty good speed, and they're unapologetically male-oriented, like men's fiction. Men's fiction has suffered the most from this political claptrap because the men are so toxic. BTFO with that shit. So yes, go with the Biz Archives. Give them a look-see. They have their stuff on Amazon as well as their main website there. And if you do want a sword and sorcery vein, or just something in the vein of the old pulps with a healthy amount of men's fiction, even from like Weird West to cosmic horror to everything else on the sun, they got it.
All right. Well, I am going to recommend this week Caliphate by Tom Krautman. It's a free read. You can download it for free on Kindle. I liked it enough that I actually bought the book when I could on hard copy. I will warn you, it is an intense read and it goes some dark places, but it also is reaffirming. It's the kind of book I would highly recommend. And just for the short version, it's the United States versus a Caliphate Europe.
Huh.
And I was deeply impressed by it.
I've got one. It's Planet Side by Michael Mamet. And I love it because it's not a, even though it takes place in a spacefaring future, it's not one of these things where like the fate of the universe is at stake or any of that other bullshit. No, it's a police detective story, set with, oh, I'm sorry, Rold. What's the, my brain's not working. Military police.
MPs.
MP, thank you. He's he's an MP who has been asked by one of his buddies who has gone higher up in the ranks than him. So it's like, hey, there's a general's daughter who's missing. Can you look into this? We want to keep it on the down low, and it goes from there. And it's one of those stories where I got it just because I wanted to waste some time, and it stuck in my mind as being one of like the best contemporary sci-fi books I've read. I wasn't too thrilled with the second one, and enough that I didn't bother with the third. But the first one's amazing, and quite frankly, I think it should have stayed that way. So pick up the first book, Planet Side.
Oh wait, the link didn't go through completely. Let me fix that.
Okay.
Can I throw? I don't have anything modern because, to be honest, like I said, I quit reading a lot of modern science fiction because up until recently, my life was hopeless enough where I was, trying to stretch $20 for 40, so I didn't need nihilism. And pretty much I was buying my books from the used bookstore. So could I throw out 3 older ones?
Sure.
Okay, Hammer Slammers by David Drake. Excellent series, really good, kind of gritty. Shows a little bit of its age, but definitely shows his background with 11th ACR in Vietnam. Then you've got it's still coming out. Axler's been dead for years, but the series is still out there. It's pulp science fiction, post-apocalyptic. Deathlands, which is the ongoing series following a group of friends 200 years after the bombs dropped in 1999. It's a fun read. Don't take it seriously, and don't look too deep into it. It's just good sci-fi fun. And last but not least, I can never recommend this book enough. Armor by Stakely.
Oh yeah.
I mean, that book should be on everybody's shelf. Everybody who loves science fiction, read Armor by Stakely. It's really, really out there. Well, it's not out there. It's really, really good, and it's kind of defining. And when it comes to power armor and solo heroes, this is the book.
Nice.
So that's what I got.
Well, here's the one thing I'll ask you since you brought that up, and I realize we're running short on time here. We're already over time, but Armor. I loved the first half of the book. I was kind of bored with the second half.
I thought the second half was interesting because the whole thing with the fact that this guy who considered himself the toughest man alive had to deal with the fact there was somebody out there that made him look like a child. And the whole how reading those Armor's records slowly but surely ground down the team that was looking at it. I thought it was really
maybe I should finish that.
The puppy in the well story will stick with you.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't quite get to the part where it was grinding them down. I was like, oh, wait a minute. When are we going to go back to the armor? The hell of a war.
Yeah, Felix was the engine.
Yeah, that was incredible. I would say that is among one of the best books I've ever read. At least the first half was just utterly amazing. It was unrelenting, too.
He spent the rest of his life trying to write a sequel.
Really?
Yeah, and eventually he started doing heroin.
Oh, Jesus.
Okay, so when did vampires come into play? Yes, the inspiration for John Carpenter's Vampires.
Huh?
Oh, Stakely wrote 2 books. Armor, and then the other one was Vampires.
Never read Vampires.
Vampires, which then John Carpenter sort of made into a movie. It wasn't quite a straight translation. Adapted, yeah. He adapted into the film Vampires. And it's about vampire hunters for the Vatican.
Huh. I think he also moved that into a video game.
Was that James Woods?
Mm-hmm. James was great in it.
Yeah, I thought it was good.
Well, the only modern people I really read are modern indies.
Well, that's why I'm getting people to mention books to read, because everyone needs them. Right now, there are so many good books being published by indie authors that aren't getting attention.
Yeah. Right now, when I try to read, I end up setting the book down and walking over and start typing. I don't know what.
That's my
okay.
problem.
You can do that.
Miracle that I get through like a chapter or two.
That's I don't know. Like I find it difficult to read fiction because then I'm like most of the time I'm like I could write better than this, so then I just want to write. But I will like one guy that has kept my attention is one of our brothers here is Hastings in the Crimson Spark.
William.
Oh yeah, you know what? Yeah, Hastings.
So I've been checking on, I've been reading some of that. I'm through the first couple of chapters. Great beginning, very dynamic, great intro. The entry point is you don't even though that is the meet cute of the whole situation, you don't get that from it. It just seems like very random. It's well done, a very good description, but not too florid. He's not like George R. Martin, where he describes
No,
3
he's
pages
not.
of food and like a door that nobody goes through. But
That what that's the overabundance of that showing stuff that I absolutely detest. I only show stuff if it's pertinent to like the character's mindset or the story.
I am
Yeah.
very verbose.
I write
I'm very verbose.
impatiently, and I guess is the way I write. But we're not getting into that because that's another story. But Hastings is great. Crimson Sparks. I haven't read Crimson Spark. I haven't read the other one. The Vagabond Legacy. I'm listening to it by Vic Mignogna. It's great. I would recommend it to anyone.
Yeah, his readers are always excellent. And that's what I want to bring up. The other book by William Hastings. I finished it, loved this. Yes, Vatican Championship Wrestling. It is funny, but it's also serious. And it blows me away that he is able to tell a legit pro wrestling story about an exorcist who works for the Vatican, who has to go undercover as a wrestler to exorcise a demon. And it is really good. And man, does he know his lore.
And the Audible version, he got an actual pro wrestler to narrate it, so he can do all the voices.
That is another thing that I noticed in Sparks is the psychology of
Yes.
their actual. It's not like a bunch of other people where it looks like they Google a couple of things and everything. He really goes into the depth of the psychology and what they're thinking and going against themselves and the conflict and the sort of constant struggle that somebody with actual mental disorder has. And I was impressed with that because it's difficult to write, especially in a way that's entertaining. But he manages to pull it off.
Well, as I told him when I was editing it, I said, you do realize that your female protagonist is coming off as a sociopath and a psycho, right? And he goes, yeah, that's what I was aiming for. I'm like, okay.
Right.
She's very quickly not going to be likable. He goes, yeah, that's the point. And it's bringing her out. I mean, she's introduced kicking the crap out of some person for no reason. And I wasn't sure, my immediate thought was like, oh shit, is this another of these whamming
Hyper confident,
hyper confident, I don't need nobody
Oh,
stories.
and I
And
hate it
he's
when
like, no, that's not what I'm going for. I'm showing how broken she is. And then you see her going forward. Like, okay, I have respect. This is good.
Yeah, because my biggest thing is when they demasculate all the men just to prop up the women. Because I wondered, they did that within the first 20 minutes of that Stargate Catherine thing, and they completely bungled the canon of that whole series by doing that. Like,
when Stargate went to the Sci-Fi Channel, I checked out. I'm like, I'm done.
I watched SG-1 for a while.
SG-1
it got boring.
Yeah, SG-1 was fun. I enjoyed it for certain aspects, but they don't make stuff where, people are a team. Remember, anybody up and coming, please write your men and women as a team. That's so refreshing.
Yes.
An actual team, not.
And have it where they don't have to belittle each other to showcase themselves.
Yes.
I mean, that should be a villain.
In this particular case, I agree with Lego the movie, the song. Everything is awesome. Everybody can be awesome.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Except John Scalzi.
Okay.
He's a cunt.
Okay. Well, everyone in your story can be awesome.
Well, speaking of awesome, where can all of our listeners or watchers find everybody online?
You
Who
can
wants
find
to
my
go
stuff. You can find my stuff on Amazon. Rolf's Bloodthorn. You got the Behold Humanity series. That is the main series, which is current online. It's up to 757 chapters, 2.5 million words. Only 5 books are out. I'm releasing them as soon as they get edited and covers. The side series, which is Tales of the Terran Confederacy, that is so you don't have to page through like 8 books in order to read about your favorite story arc. So if you haven't read the main series, don't read the Tales of the Terran Confederacy or you'll get spoilers. Other than that, that's where you can find my stuff. My webpage is currently under construction because I took Ishi's advice and I'm starting to get a webpage put together.
Excellent.
Yeah, buddy. Because it's nice to be able to have a central place for everybody.
And it's on Reddit and Royal Road if you want to read it for free because times are tough all over.
Oh yes, but I'm one of those crazy people. It's like, okay, I don't have the paycheck now, but this month I will support this person. The next month I'll go with this person.
Well, I totally get it because I've been at the point where I was eating the top ramen noodles for one meal and then making broth with the flavor packet for my next meal.
Oh,
Yep.
God.
Well,
That's
hey,
harsh.
you do what you got to do to make it.
My parents got
Yeah.
to live on chili and rice for a couple of years until Reagan gave them a price hike in my dad's paycheck. Woo! But as for me, you can find me at Birdside of Hell, aka Twitter, at Fiona Wolf 2. And then
Sorry to interrupt you. Before we do
Yes.
that, here is a link to all of Rolt's stuff. And yeah, he's got plenty to read, and it's all good.
That's 2.5 million words.
here you go.
Oh, and if you want to read about a female antagonist who's probably somebody you're not going to like and is brutal as hell, there's always Call Me D.
Yes.
All right, Fiona?
But yes, I'm over at the Birdside of Hell at Fiona Wolf 2. And then I'll also link my main thing for Upload Protocol. I haven't published it officially yet because I want to give everybody a full 13-book series before I do so.
Okay, do we have a link here? Yes, we do.
Yar.
Yar.
All right,
Buddy?
Professor
Uh,
Raptor.
You can find me at the Buddy Lord with 2 Ds on the bird sides of hell, as Fiona was talking about so eloquently and lovingly. You can also find me at sinsofthefae.com. You're talking about wholesome and that kind of thing, mythology, in embracing mythology, not rejecting it. The book it's a fairy tale, where the parents actually survive. So that's kind of interesting, right? That's different.
Yeah.
And we actually just released a bunch of, because we got our first the proof back, and it was nearly perfect, only 2 errors for the first I guess it would be the first issue, but it's really the 24-page Ashcan, which would be half the size of what we promised, but we want to give a 100-page one, and that's going to be debuting at the Calgary Expo this weekend.
Nice.
Very nice.
So, and then as far as the book goes, the light novel, which is a completely different story now to the comic book, that is edited about 60% of the way and should be finished with that first portion of it pretty soon. And then hopefully I can give it to Ishi and he can do his thing, and then we'll knock it back up on Amazon, and then I'll have 2 books. Yay.
Hell yeah. I also would recommend everyone check out the Discord
Yes.
that has been set up by Aloise. She's kind of the webmaster of it, and she has done an awesome job. So if you're listening, Aloise, once again, thank you for maintaining that for us. You rock. Link is in the description. And finally, for me, I'm going to recommend 2 things. First and foremost, I really want those of you who haven't read it or listened to it yet, please check out the Titanium Rain audio drama. It's one of the things I'm most proud of. It's full cast. It's very well done. It's got its own unique soundtrack. And if it weren't for Neil Gaiman, it would have won an award, which would have made a difference. But that's a story for another time. But yeah, it's an air war between the United States and China in the future. And somebody had asked about what to recommend as far as getting familiar with Lovecraft-themed fiction. Somebody said he bet that I would say Whispers from the Abyss. Well, I wouldn't have, but since you suggested it, why the hell not? Whispers from the Abyss. There are 2 anthologies that
Yes.
were edited and published by Kat and I. It's got one of my stories in the first one. And we
I have a
have,
story too.
yes, and you have a story too. Your only published
Mhm.
story, but it's well worth reading. And it is also available on Audible.
Mhm.
And again, great reader for the book.
Well, yeah, go check it out.
So thank you for joining us.
This was a great show, guys.
Yay.
All right. Good night.
No. Good night.